Welcome back everyone to another video. Today we're going to be reading the story of Berry. Teachers, if you want the resources for this video, lesson plans, slides, activities, anything you need, just hop over to my teachers page and you'll be able to purchase or get some free items for your classroom. Students, at the end of this video, you are going to have 15 multiple choice questions on Berry. So let's get into a summary of Berry and look at some of the characters that are featured in this story. So, Berry is the story of Milberry Jones, a young black man who is overworked and underpaid. He faces racism or prejudice from one of the main caregivers or the secretary or the gatekeeper or the main housekeeper at Dr. Renfield's home for crippled children. Some of the characters that we're going to meet are Dr. Renfield, Milberry Jones, the main character, the protagonist, the nurses, and Mrs. Osborne. Now, Mrs. Osborne is the housekeeper. She's also the gatekeeper, right? She is prejudiced, she's manipulative, and she performs kindness when it is convenient for her. She functions to embody subtle racism and economic control over Black labor. Dr. Renfield owns the summer home for crippled children. He's detached, really doesn't care here nor there. He's profit driven and he's paternalistic. He functions to represent the exploitation of Black labor. The nurses in this story, they are lazy, they are self-centered, and they are indifferent to children's needs. And that is why at the end of the story we see where Barry got into trouble for something that he should not have been doing, but because the nurses weren't doing their job, they had Barry to do their job for them. Finally, Milberry Jones, he is the protagonist and he works in the kitchen, but you saw that when you read the story, you will see that he is doing everything on top of his work, and he's also paid less money than the worker before him. He's very hardworking, he's kind, and he's observant. In the middle of the story, we see that because Barry's observant, he realized that the nurses did not really care about the children and that they only pretended to love the kids when the kids' parents came to see them. So let's begin the reading of Barry by Langston Hughes. When the boy arrived on the 4 o'clock train, lo and behold, he turned out to be colored. Mrs. Osborne saw him the minute he got out of the station wagon, but certainly there was nothing to be done about it that night, with no trains back to the city before morning. So she set him to washing dishes. Lord knows there were plenty. The Scandinavian kitchen boy had left right after breakfast, giving no notice, leaving her and the cook to do everything. Her wire to the employment office in Jersey City brought results, but dark ones. The card said his name was Milberry Jones. Well, where was he to sleep? Heretofore, the kitchen boy and the handyman gardener chauffeur shared the same quarters. But Mrs. Osborne had no idea how the handyman might like Negroes. Help was so touchy, and it was hard keeping good servants in the country. So right after dinner, leaving Milbury with his arms in the dishwater, Mrs. Osborne made a beeline across the side lawn for Dr. Renfield's cottage. She heard the kids laughing and playing on the big screen in front porch of the sanatorium. She heard one of the nurses say to a child, "Behave, Billy," as she went across the yard under the pine and maple trees. Mrs. Osborne hoped Dr. Renfield would be on his porch. She hated to knock at the door and perhaps be faced with his wife. The gossip among the nurses and help at Dr. Renfield's summer home for crippled children had it that Mrs. Osborne was in love with Dr. Renfield, that she just worshipped him, that she followed him with her eyes every chance she got. and not only with her eyes. Of course, there wasn't a word of truth in it, Mrs. Osborne said to herself, admitting at the same time that Martha Renfield, his wife, was certainly not good enough for the doctor. Anyway, tonight she was not bound on any frivolous errand towards the doctor's cottage. She had to see him about this Negro in their midst. At least they'd have to keep him there overnight or until they got somebody else to help in the kitchen. However, he looked like a decent boy. Dr. Renfield was not at home. His wife came to the door, spoke most coldly, and said that she presumed, as usual, the doctor would make his rounds at the home at 8. She hoped Mrs. Osborne could wait until then to see him. Good evening. Mrs. Osborne went back to the dusk, dark yard. She heard the surf rushing at the beach below and saw the new young moon rising. She thought maybe the doctor was walking along the sea in the twilight alone. Dr. Renfield, Dr. Ren... When he made the usual rounds at 8, he came, for a moment, by Mrs. Osborne's little office, where the housekeeper held forth over her linens and her accounts. He turned his young but bearded face towards Mrs. Osborne, cast his great dark eyes upon her, and said, I hear you asked to see me. Yes, indeed, Dr. Renfield. Mrs. Osborne bubbled and gurgled. We have a problem on our hands. You know, the kitchen man left this morning, so I sent a wire to the high-class help agency in the city for somebody right away by the 4 o'clock train. And they sent us a Negro. He seems to be a nice boy and all that, but I just don't know how he would fit in our home. Now, what do you think? The doctor looked at her with great seriousness, he thought. Then he answered with a question. Do the other servants mind? Well, I can't say they do. They got along all right tonight during dinner, but the problem is, where would he sleep? Oh, yes, said Dr. Renfield, pursing his lips. And whether we should plan to keep him all summer or just till we get someone else? I see, said Dr. Renfield. And again he thought, you say he can do the work? How about the attic in this building? It's not in use. And by the way, how much did we pay the other fellow? $10 a week, Mrs. Osborne, raising her eyes. Well, pay the darky 8, said Dr. Renfield, and keep him. And for a moment he gazed into Mrs. Osborne's eyes. Good night, then turned and left her, left her, left her. So it was that Milberry entered into the service at Dr. Renfield's summer home for crippled children. Milberry was a nice black boy, big, good-natured, and strong, like what Paul Robeson must have been at 20, except that he wasn't educated. He was from Georgia, where they don't have many schools for Negroes, and he hadn't been North long. He was glad to have a job, even if it was at a home for crippled children way out in the country on a beach 5 miles from the nearest railroad. Milberry had been hungry for weeks in Newark and Jersey City. He needed work and food. And even if he wasn't educated, he had plenty of mother wit and lots of intuition about people and places. It didn't take him long to realize that he was doing far too much work for the home's $8 a week, and that everybody was imposing on him in that taken for granted way white folks do with Negro help. Milberry got up at 5:30 in the mornings, made the fire for the cook, set the water to boiling for the head nurse's coffee, started peeling potatoes, onions, and apples. After breakfast, he washed up all the dishes, scoured the pots and pans, scrubbed the floors, and carried in wood for the fireplace in the front room, which really wasn't his job at all, but the handyman's who had put it off on Milberry. The waitresses, too, got in the habit of asking him to polish their silver and ice their water. And Mrs. Osborne always had something extra that needed to be done, not kitchen boy work. A cellar to be cleaned out, or the linen in her closet reshelved, or the dining room windows washed. Milberry knew they took him for a workhorse, a fool, and a nigger. Still, he did everything and didn't look mad. Jobs were too hard to get, and he had been hungry too long in town. Besides, Milburn said to himself, the ways of white folks, some white folks is too much for me. I reckon there must be a few good ones, but most of them ain't good. Leastwise, they don't treat me good. And Lord knows, I ain't never done nothing to 'em. Nothing at all. But at the home, it wasn't the work that really troubled him, or the fact that nobody ever said anything about a day off or a little extra pay. No, he'd had many jobs like this one before, where they worked you to death. But what really worried Milberry at this place was that he seemed to sense something wrong, something phony about the whole house. Except the little crippled kids, they're like himself because they couldn't help it. Maybe it was the lonesomeness of that part of the Jersey coast, with its pines and scrubs and sand, but more nearly, Milbury thought it was that their doctor, with the movie beard and the woman's eyes at the head of the home. And it was the cranky nurses always complaining about food and the little brats under them, and the constant talk of who was having an affair with Dr. Renfield, and Mrs. Osborne's grand manner to everybody but the doctor, and all the white help kicking about their pay, and how far it was from town, and how no good the doctor was, or the head nurse, or the cook, or Mrs. Osborne. It's sure phony, this here place, Milbury said to himself. Funny how the food ain't nearly so good except when some ma or pa or some child is visiting here. Then, when they gone, it drops right back down again. This here hangout is just Doc Renfield's own private jip game. Poor little children. The Negro was right. The summer home was run for profits from the care of permanently deformed children of middle class parents who couldn't afford to pay too much, but who still paid well. Too well for what their children got in return. Milbury worked in the kitchen and saw the good cans open for company and the cheap cans open for the kids. Somehow he didn't like such dishonesty. Somehow he thought he wouldn't even stay there and work if it wasn't for the kids. For the children grew terribly to like Milbury. One afternoon, during his short period of rest between meals, he had walked down to the beach where those youngsters who could drag themselves about were playing and others were sitting in their wheelchairs watching. The sky was only a little cloudy and the sand was gray. But quite all of a sudden it began to rain. The nurses saw Milbury and called him to help them get the young ones quickly back to the house. Some of the children were too heavy for a nurse to lift easily into a wheelchair. Some couldn't run at all. The handyman helper wasn't around. So Milbury picked up child after child, sometimes two at once, and carried them up to the broad screened-in porch of the home like a big, gentle horse. The children loved it, riding on his broad back or riding in his arms in the soft, gentle rain. Come and play with us sometimes, One of them called as Milberry left them all on the safe, dry porch with their nurses. Sure, come back and play, another said. So Milberry, the next day, went down to the beach again in the afternoon and played with the crippled children. At first the nurses, Miss Baxter and Mrs. Hill, didn't know whether to let him stay or not, but their charges seemed to enjoy it. Then, when the time came to go in for rest before dinner, Milbury helped push the wheelchairs, a task which the nurses hated. And he held the hands of those kids with braces and twisted limbs as they hobbled along. He told them stories, and he made up jokes in the sun on the beach. And one rainy afternoon on the porch, he sang songs, old Southern Negro songs, funny ones that the children loved. Almost every afternoon then, Milbury came to the beach after the lunch and dishes were done, and he had washed himself, except those afternoons when Mrs. Osborne found something else for him to do. Vases to be emptied or bathtubs to be scrubbed. The children became Milbury's friends. They adored him, and he them. They called him Berry. They put their arms around him. The grown up white folks only spoke to him when they had some job for him to do, or when they were kidding him about being dark and talking flat and southern and mispronouncing words, but the kids didn't care how he talked. They loved his songs and his stories. And he made up stories out of his own head just for them. Poor little crippled up things that they were, for Berry loved them too. So the summer wore on. August came. In September, the home would close, but disaster overtook Milbury before then. At the end of August, a week of rain fell, and the children could not leave the porch. Then, one afternoon, the sun suddenly came out bright and warm. The sea water was blue again, and the sand on the beach glistened. Miss Baxter, who by now had got the idea it was part of Milbury's job to help her with the children, went to the kitchen and called him while he was still washing lunch and dishes. Berry, we're going to take the children down to the beach. Come on and help us with the chairs as soon as you get through. Yes, ma'am, said Berry. When he came out on the porch, the kids were all excited about playing in the sun once more. Little hunchbacks jumped and cried and clapped their hands, and little paralytics laughed in their wheelchairs, and some with braces on had already hobbled out the screen door and were gathered on the walk. Hello, Barry, the children called. Hey, Barry, they cried to the black boy. Barry grinned. It was a few hundred yards to the beach. On the cement walk, you could push a couple of wheelchairs at a time to the sand's edge. Some of the children propelled their own. Besides the nurses, today the handyman was helping, for the sun might not last long. Take me, a little boy called from his wheelchair. Barry, take me. Sure, I will, the young Negro said gently. But when Barry started to push the chair down from the porch to the walk, the child, through excess of joy, suddenly leaned forward, laughing, and suddenly lost his balance. Barry saw that he was going to fall. To try to catch the boy, the young Negro let the chair go. But quick as a wink, the child had fallen one way onto the lawn, the other onto the cement walk. The back of the chair was broken, snapped off, except for the wicker. The little boy lay squalling on the ground in the grass. Lord have mercy! All the nurses came running, a handyman and Mrs. Osborne too. Barry picked up the boy, who clung to his neck sobbing, more frightened it seemed than hurt. Poor little child, Barry kept saying. Is you hurt much? I'm so sorry. But the nurses were very angry, for they were responsible. And Mrs. Osborne, well, she lit out for Dr. Renfield. The little boy still clung to Berry and wouldn't let the nurses take him at all. He stopped crying when Dr. Renfield arrived, but was still sniffing. He had his arms tight around the black boy's neck. "Give that child to me," Dr. Renfield said, his brown beard pointing straight at Berry, his mind visualizing irate parents and a big damaged suit, and bad publicity for the home. But when the doctor tried to take the child, the little boy wriggled and cried and wouldn't let go of Berry. With what strength he had in his crooked braced limbs, he kicked at the doctor. "Give me that child!" Dr. Renfield shouted at Berry. "Bring him into my office and lay him down." He put on his nose glasses. "You careless black rascal! And you, Miss Baxter!" The doctor shriveled her with a look. "I want to see you." In the clinic, it turned out that the child wasn't really hurt, though. His legs had been, from birth, twisted and deformed. Nothing could injure them much further, and fortunately, his spine wasn't weak. But the doctor kept saying, "Criminal carelessness! Criminal carelessness!" Mrs. Osborne kept agreeing with him. "Yes, it is. Indeed, it is. Milberry was to blame." The black boy felt terrible, but nobody else among the grown-ups seemed to care how he felt. They all said, "What dumbness! He had let that child fall." "Get rid of him," Dr. Renfield said to the housekeeper. "Today! The fool nigger! And deduct $10 from for that broken chair." "We don't pay him but 8," Mrs. Osborne said. "Well, deduct that," said the doctor. So without his last week's wages, Milberry went to Jersey City. So I messed up a few of the things, but hey, the human being here, right? So students, I want you to answer these 3 questions for me and then move on to the multiple choice questions in the description box. And I want you to think very carefully about how Berry felt when he went to the home, when they called him a darky, when they called him the N-word, when they just overworked him, underpaid him, and at the end of it, he left with a negative balance. The doctor said charge him $10 for the broken chair. They only paid him $8, so the math was not mathing, right? So here are the 3 questions I would love for you to answer. You can pause the video, go back to the beginning of the video, and scroll through, pause again, take some notes, write your responses. Question number 1, what is Mrs. Osborne's role at the home? Question number 2, why did the children love Berry? Question number 3, why was Berry blamed for the incident? And how would you feel if that happened to you? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this video. Remember, 15 multiple choice questions are in the description box. Just go ahead, look for the questions, answer these 3 short answer questions. And teachers, remember, if you want more resources on this story, please go to my teachers page at Let's Get Lit with English and purchase. Have a nice day.